Welcome to Passport to Africa on Noble Entertainment Television. On today's show, we'll journey to a place that's home to Black and brown people across the world, Africa, affectionately known as the motherland. Guests include Jessica Nabongo, a Ugandan American who's a writer, photographer, travel expert, and so much more. In 2019, she was named one of the 30 most powerful women in travel by Condé Nast Traveler. Also joining are Eric Martin and Kent Johnson, who co-founded Black and Abroad, an award-winning travel and lifestyle brand. After seeing a need to restructure the international landscape for Black travelers, Black and Abroad was built on 3 key principles: explore, embrace, and empower. Let's journey together. And now, let's welcome our hosts, Tiffany Davis and Alessia Wheeler.
Hello. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. As you can see, the dynamic duo is back again. I am Alessia Wheeler, the Executive Director of Innovation and Marketing Operations in Travel Retail, as well as the Noble Travel Retail Chair.
And I am Tiffany Davis, Executive Director of Finance and Strategy of the Jane Huddis Brand Cluster, and I am one of the Noble Global co-chairs.
And for the next hour or so, we are your co-hosts for the Black History Month capstone event, Passport to Africa. Now, Tiffany, if memory serves me right, we hosted the HBCU countdown, almost a year ago. And if I must admit, it was the event of the year, if you don't count, Isabel Wilkerson showing up for Juneteenth.
I mean, I must say Noble Travel Retail always brings the heat when it comes to events.
That we do. And today, you guys, we are so excited to take you on the journey to learn more about the illustrious continent of Africa. It's really important to have this conversation because we really want to honor the people of color across the diaspora. So African Americans, Africans, Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Latinas, it all stems from Africa, which we affectionately call the motherland. And this celebration will capture the spirit of modern Black movements around the world, such as the Year of Return, which was introduced by the government of Ghana, and it's now an annual celebration that marks 400 years of African resilience.
Yes, it's going to be a beautiful show and a great conversation. And I must say, thank you to Noble Travel Retail for having me back as part of the Travel Retail family. Very honored to co-host this event with you today, Alessia. And I would also like to, give a shout out to Noble and the Black History Month Planning Committee, because as you all have seen, or if you haven't seen, go check it out on my ELC. But there has been an amazing month of programs, and I'm sure this conversation will be no exception. So very excited about this capstone event and the journey home.
Amazing. And Travel Retail, you know how we do. This is a conversation. So we encourage you to be in the comments, be in the chat, ask your questions, because we do have a portion of the agenda that is dedicated to a live Q&A session with our special guests. With that, I'm turning it over to Tiffany.
So let's get into this show. Our first guest for today is Jessica Nabongo. She should be no stranger to many of you in Noble Travel Retail, as she joined us last year for our Black History Month conversation. Jessica is a former United Nations employee turned travel enthusiast and cultural ambassador. As an influencer, Jessica's travels and expertise have been captured by national outlets such as Forbes, Condé Nast, Traveler, BBC, News World Service, the New York Times, and much, much more. So let's check out some of her work about changing the travel narrative and making the travel space more inclusive.
Jessica Nabongo began her journey in travel at the age of 4 with her first trip to Canada. Her journeys continued as she became the first Black woman on record to travel to all 195 countries of the world in October of 2019. Her work is about changing the travel narrative and making the travel space more inclusive, as she uses her story to educate and inspire others to travel and experience the world around them. She is the founder and CEO of The Catch, a lifestyle brand featuring goods designed by artisans all over the world, discovered during her global adventures. As an American-born Ugandan, her journeys across the continent of Africa are always exciting, inspiring, encouraging, and full of love.
Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be back with you all. So thank you so much for Noble for bringing me back. And I'm loving this year's topic because I love everything African. So I'm just going to dive right in. I'll start with a bit of an introduction just so everyone can be a little bit more familiar with me. But thank you for that beautiful montage. I'm like, this is so good. Can I use that for something else? But yeah, so I'm Jessica Nabongo. I identify as an American-born Ugandan, and I'm from Detroit. I rep my city, but I recently moved to Los Angeles, California, which is where I'm joining you from this morning. And so just a little bit of background on me. You heard it there. My first international trip at the age of 4. My parents love to travel, so I grew up in a home with encyclopedias and atlases and globes, and just been traveling, again, internationally since I was 4. And if we do a quick fast forward, I went to undergrad in New York City, moved back to Detroit for 2 years working for a pharmaceutical company, and just was dissatisfied. So that was in 2008. And then I found my way to Japan to teach English. After that, I was in Japan for 1 year and traveled for 9 months. And it was during that 9-month period of bouncing around everywhere that I started my blog, thecatchmeifyoucan.com, which still is existing today. And so travel has been such a centerpiece of my life for a really, really long time. And some could call it an addiction, I suppose. So after that summer, I ended up moving to London for 1 year, doing my master's at the London School of Economics, focusing on international political and economic history. I then moved to the continent. I lived in Benin and West Africa for 6 months, working for an NGO. And it was tough. It was rural Africa. It was tough, I won't lie. But it was great that was my first and only time actually living on the continent. I've never actually lived in Uganda, though. Obviously, I visit a lot. And so after Benin, I ended up back in Rome, working for the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization for several years. And then I moved back to DC, worked in an American office space, didn't love it, quit. And then I haven't actually worked for anyone since then. So in 2015, when I left that job, I launched Jet Black, which was a boutique luxury travel agency. that I started really with the idea of changing the narrative around travel. So the big thing for me was that I wanted to encourage people to travel to Africa, Central and South America, and the Caribbean, because I had traveled extensively in Europe, but also extensively in Africa, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. And for me, what I love is like when I'm in Brazil or I'm in Colombia, like I love the connection that I feel to the people, because many of them are African. You know, when you're in Brazil, when you're in Bahia, like those are Africans. And so for me, like I saw this idea of just getting people to see where the diaspora is around the world. And initially, there wasn't necessarily a focus on Black travelers, but it kind of evolved into that. And so the company was very successful. I ended up shutting it down in 2020 because, hey, pandemic. So that's a little bit about me. And then, so I've been to all 54 countries on the continent. Africa is without a doubt my favorite place to travel. And so I first went when I was 6 years old. That was my first trip to Uganda. And it's interesting because, you know, when you go as a child, you're very open. You're just there to learn and see what's going on. I wasn't taken aback by the fact that, you know, there was no running water, electricity in my mom's village. Like my dad's side is from the city, but my mom is from a small village. And it was fine. You know, as a child, I enjoyed playing with my cousins. I enjoyed chasing pigs around and the chickens. And it was just so beautiful because for me, even though I was born in the US, I went there and I felt like I was at home. And then I can continue to go over years and it still always feels like home. But what I will say is that via my travels to Africa as an adult for leisure, I have fallen in love with so many other countries on the continent, both in Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And so, you know, like I think of crazy adventures in Namibia with some friends. I traveled with two people who I barely knew, and we had such an amazing time. Namibia is such a beautiful country. I think about when I was in Guinea-Bissau and I needed to get to Guinea. And so I drove with these two guys in the middle of the night. They were basically strangers. And, they took this adventure with me because at that point I was trying to get to every country in the world and trying to maximize my time in doing it. So for me, Africa, not just Uganda, the entire continent really does feel like home. I have a very close friend from Tunisia, so I've been there a couple of times. Morocco. There's just something about the entire continent that really just warms me up. You know, I always feel welcomed. Always feel love. I feel joy. And I really love it. So in terms of, I have a book coming out. It's called The Catch Me If You Can. It's being published by National Geographic. And within it, I discuss 100 countries. And of the 100 countries, 36 of them are African countries. So Africa definitely is like the majority of the book in terms of like representation from 6 continents. And what you'll see is like all of these beautiful stories that I have over the years of my travel to the continent. And it was important for me because so much of the work that I do is about changing the narrative. So I'm really excited to have a partner like National Geographic to be able to tell these stories and really to get people to think differently about these countries on the continent, and just give a little more complexity and dynamism to Africans. Because I think that's something that we've been missing, particularly in the travel space. It's ruled by white men, essentially. And we've seen the world through the lens of white men for such a long time. So for me, it's just a really beautiful opportunity to give a different perspective. And so I'm really excited about that. So go pre-order that. And, I just want to talk a little bit about like the African-American relation to the community and to the continent. As far as I'm concerned, African-American culture is the most exported culture in the world, right? And you can't ignore the roots of the continent in that, right? And I think the biggest thing to remember is we are the culture. You know, when you look at everything, every single thing you look at. I know now they're talking about slugging with Vaseline. I'm like, Black folks have been using Vaseline forever, but now it's a whole new TikTok trend. Okay. You know what I mean? It's like in the corn, I can't remember what they were calling Kim Kardashian's cornrows, but it's just so important to see how literally everything that is successful we influence. You look at Twitter. The only reason Twitter still exists is because of Black Twitter. And so traveling throughout the world, you see that global influence. I mean, it's largely, I would say, it's largely based on African American culture. But what I love is that now African culture is starting to be exported. And like, I'm very happy that now Africans are cool, because that was not the case when I was growing up in the US. But you see now there's like this real love of the continent and people wanting to go back. And for me, like, I love it, like, because I spend time on the continent every single year. Even in 2020, the last place I went in February was Uganda, and the first place I went in December was Senegal. So I try as much as possible to spend time on the continent any chance I get. So yeah, I think it's really important to remember, like, as guests. So here's what I will say. As people who are going to visit the continent, and especially for the first time, I think it's so important to go with openness, with respect, and, you know, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of being a student. Obviously, all of these different cultures are incredibly different and incredibly unique. And I think it's just, you just want to go and be open and just like take it all in. You know, it's traveling around the continent is so varied. It's so rich. It's so beautiful. And, you know, just being around people that look like you is just amazing. So, yes. And then, okay, so now here's the fun part. So I'm going to give you guys some recommendations. I hope you guys have your pens and papers or fingers ready on your keyboard, because these are my African travel recommendations. So first, I broke it down into different pieces because I don't have favorites. So don't ask me what's my favorite country, because I don't do that. But what I can do is my favorite beaches. So my favorite beaches on the continent are Zanzibar, specifically Nungwi, but all of Zanzibar is amazingly gorgeous. Lamu. So Lamu is in Kenya. It's on the coast of Kenya. The beaches aren't amazing, but the energy and the vibe of Lamu is totally worth the visit. Comoros, which is a very not well-known country in the Indian Ocean, has outstanding beaches. Not great tourism infrastructure, but the beaches are amazing. And then finally, the Seychelles. Seychelles is just, you know, it's cliche for a reason. Very, very beautiful. Then my favorite African cities, Accra, Ghana, always lit. Lagos, if you can handle a champagne and suya diet. So suya is like this grilled meat. And when you go, you have to go to Lagos in December. And literally you will only drink champagne and eat suya. And it's amazing. And the parties are amazing. Then Dakar is one of my favorite cities. I spent a lot of time in Senegal, just vibes. It's very calm, but I will say, if you want to go to Dakar, you need to brush up on your French. Then Joburg is always a vibe, and Nairobi. For nature, I recommend Tanzania and Kenya. I think for me, the Serengeti and Masai Mara, which is the same piece of land in two countries, best safaris. I've been on safari in like 11 countries. So trust me, those are the best. And then Namibia is otherworldly, like just such a stunning country. And then Uganda. I think people don't give Uganda enough love, but like we have Lake Victoria, we have the Nile, a ton of national parks, and just the natural beauty of Uganda is just stunning. And then I want to give a few book recommendations for people who just want to read more African stories. The first one is Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. So I first read this book when it came out. I think it was like 2012. And for me, as an African raised in America, it was so nice because it was the first time I got to see myself, you know. It was the first time that I got to see my lived experience in a book form. So I love that book. I think it's really great, especially if you want to understand more about how one can like be in America, growing up in America, but like not be connected to Black American culture. There's so much I don't know about Black American culture, and I'm learning every day. My friends think it's hilarious when I have these when I just learn these random cultural things that I just don't know because I didn't grow up in an American household. I grew up in Uganda. Like inside of those four walls was Uganda. So Americana is an amazing book. Stay With Me. I cannot pronounce the author's name. Nigerian woman. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. Homegoing by Yagyasi is really amazing. And it's interesting because it takes place along a really long time spectrum and also both in Ghana and the US. So another really beautiful book in terms of like the connection between the continent and the US. And then finally, the Catch Me If You Can. Coming out June 14th with National Geographic. It's about one woman's journey to every country in the world. So again, I think, like the publishers are really excited. We've never seen a book like this, not only from a Black woman, but a book where a single author is writing about 100 countries. Doesn't exist from a major publisher. So it's really exciting times. And yeah, so I'm going to throw it back to our beautiful host, but I look forward to, I'm going to go and read your comments now. But I look forward to the Q&A, and thank you so much for having me.
Jessica, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us again. Your stories are so powerful. I think it further pushes me, and I'm sure others, to make Africa our immediate travel destination, especially with those excellent recommendations and the books. Noble Travel Retail, we have a book club. So we're going to make sure that those books are added to our summer reading list because they sound phenomenal. And so we will see Jessica again at the end when we have Q&A. But now, new to the travel retail family is Black and Abroad founders Eric Martin and Kent Johnson. As you heard in our welcoming message, Black and Abroad is an award-winning travel and lifestyle brand that's dedicated to enhancing the travel experiences for modern travelers of color. And so in 2019, Black and Abroad launched the world-renowned Go Back to Africa project. It is a campaign that was designed to really subvert the meaning of that derogatory phrase and employ it to bring tourism dollars to the continent of Africa. In addition to that, in February of this year, the Black Elevation Map, which is a map designed to disrupt this $1 trillion US travel industry, was launched to mobilize over 30,000 Black-owned businesses and organizations. Eric and Kent have received international recognition from the likes of United Nations, Facebook, and the Washington Post, just to name a few. They have also been recognized with the Creative Data Grand Prix for the work behind Black and Abroad's Go Back to Africa campaign at the 2019 Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. So we are excited to have both of them here to discuss the impact that they have made on the travel industry. But up first, we want a sneak peek into Black and Abroad.
Them got me chinyanja bapana bachepa beating down in yamo kuteka rap on it down in yamo beba bari kuama ni yamo kumeka maheta kupaka pena mombeka bado bachepa ni yamo teka shelela pa beating go shelela pa beating go shelela ona skile ona skile
Nanya menedi hangiri nile na family standing bambiri mukantiri vikari njise afuna ni mutambire mukabede
Pama beating shelela pama beating shelela pama beating shelela pama beating.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Noble and Estee Lauder, for having us. Thank you, Alessa and Tiffany, for hosting this wonderful event and for finding us valuable for this discussion. We are incredibly happy to be here. And it's good to see old friends. Hey, Jessica, how are you doing? What you saw was the promo video for that Go Back to Africa campaign. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about how Black and Abroad came to be. So in 2015, Eric and I just sharing our travel stories, realized that we saw the Black community in the world, but we didn't see that in marketing and in media. And at the time, when we were thinking about what Black and Abroad was going to be, the Black American community was spending about $43 billion in the travel industry. And when you hear that enormous number, you expect to see $43 billion worth of representation in the travel industry. And we just did not see it there. Whenever we would Google things to do and destinations, we did not see people who looked like us or experiences that felt familiar to us happening. So we wanted to change the guard. We wanted to shift Google results. We wanted our community to see themselves represented out in the world. And that was really what drove us to start Black and Abroad. Since then, we've been able to build a community of travelers all around the world. Eric and myself, we haven't been to every country yet. We left that up to Jessica, but our community has covered the world, and we have representation on every country. And we really wanted to spark this evolution of media as it came around, the stories told in relation to the continent. And that was what led us to the work that we've done in the industry. We've launched several campaigns around disruption and changing the narrative around what it means to be Black in this world and what it means to be Black and experience this world. And the Go Back to Africa campaign is one of those keystone campaigns from our portfolio. And I'll let Eric take care of explaining that campaign.
Well, first, let me just say thank you guys for having us. We really appreciate this time. I'm Eric Martin, the co-founder and chief creative officer of Black and Abroad. And through our work around the world, as Kent mentioned, one of the things that we picked up on pretty quickly is that the continent is a hot topic amongst both our peers in the space as well as our clients that come on trips with us, mainly for its connection, the beauty, and the endless culture. But unfortunately, many of us Black people in Western societies have experienced in some way, shape, or form the disgust and anger that you feel when a bigot attempts to use our connection to the continent in an all too familiar backhanded insult, that go back to Africa, that many of us have heard at some point. So the phrase "go back to Africa" has a long, complicated history. And unfortunately, today is still widely racialized and used in racialized context, both online and beyond. According to NetBase, which is a social listening platform, back in 2019, before we started the campaign, the slur was used over 4,500 times a month online. So I'd say between 4,500 and 5,000 times a month online. We created the Go Back to Africa project to hijack the racialized and derogatory phrase in a Pan-African tourism campaign that aims to subvert the derogatory impact of the phrase by blacking out the hate-fueled social media posts and reframing them against words and images showing the beauty, diversity, and all of what the African countries have to offer. So through this campaign, we continue to aim to put a positive and uplifting spin on a negative, disparaging narrative that Africa is just this, wasteland that is undeserving of our times in our time in travels. Unfortunately, many of us, African Americans in particular, who have never been to the continent, we receive this information after years of receiving it, you kind of don't know what to expect. I mean, we've done trips on different countries on the continent where, some of our guests are just blown away with the amazing time that they have. Or some people travel with us for safety to the continent and they just don't know what to expect. And that's because of what was fed to us for so long in the media under this narrative. So, but to effectively launch this campaign worldwide, we started with tons of research, tons of data, and the hashtag, which was barely used when we started. So I'm going to bring back Kent to let you guys know a bit of some of the tools that we used to launch this project, some of the technical tools.
Yeah, so this campaign was very tech and data heavy. From inception, we've always been interested in patterns and data and how it can be changed with a little push or a little call to action. So we used 3 platforms to really bolster this campaign. Eric already mentioned one, NetBase, and that was where we initially gained that 4,500 to 5,300 times a month usage for the phrase "Go Back to Africa," which it blew our minds in 2019 that it was still being used at that much of a fury. But we had to think about what times the world was in at that point. We had a particular president in office who, bolstered that rhetoric. So we used that to really build the foundation of our campaign, to let people know that this isn't a phrase that is something of history. It's something that is still very much being used today. And that, like I said, built the foundation for our campaign. What we used next was Google Vision. Google Vision is this scary platform, and I implore you to do some research on it after this discussion. But Google Vision can take our images and extract gods of information around that image. It can pick up emotion, landmarks, activities, types of food, animals. It can pull out all of this information. So we were using that platform to scour these images on Twitter and Instagram that have been marked with a location in the continent, in any one of the 54 companies. In 54 countries. From there, we would identify those that were related to food, or those that were related to swimming, or things that were positive moments. And we corralled all of those images into the gobacktoafrica.com website. From there, we used a platform called CrowdRiff, which is a social media management analytics platform to really categorize that data. So on the gobacktoafrica.com website, you can search by theme, you can search by country, you can search by emotion. All of that is there. So if you remember the minute video, you saw things like go back to beauty, go back to cuisine. Those phrases, that cuisine, food, swimming, all of those were categorized by CrowdRiff. So those 3 platforms, NetBase, Google Vision, and CrowdRiff, were really the tools that we used to make our campaign what it was. Also, not that we used you as a tool, but the community was the biggest piece of that platform. All of those images were sourced from people who responded to our call to action to show people what the continent really offered, in opposition of the negative connotations we've known to associate with that phrase, "Go Back to Africa." So once we initiated that campaign, we had an outpouring of support from our community and those who were new to our brand, who submitted images of themselves experiencing once in a lifetime moments on the continent. And as we mentioned, our inspiration, our driving force behind Black and Abroad has always been to inspire other people to follow in footsteps that they may not have seen as accessible to them before. So that campaign really gave us the opportunity to show Africa in the way that we've experienced it, and we wanted others to, because who wouldn't want more of your homies hanging out with you on the continent, right? So we wanted to inspire folks to see that opportunity, to feel that opportunity, to know that it was very much accessible to them. We wanted to normalize what it meant for travel to Africa, normalize the understanding that these are the kinds of experiences that you will have in any one of those 54 countries. So those were the tools that we used to really bolster that campaign.
Yes, and as a result of our work, we continue to receive overwhelming support amongst the Black people in both Western societies and on the continent. This campaign is designed to live forever. We're always going to have bigots in some way, shape, or form. So the campaign was designed to keep moving. Use the hashtag when you travel. If you're on the continent, use it and show us the beauty. Show us your experience. We're on Instagram, Facebook, on all the social media platforms. But we continue to encourage our community to continue to use that hashtag so we can wipe out this hate that we receive so often. But as a result of our work, we received at the Cannes Lions Festival our campaign was awarded the Grand Prix Award for creative data, social data, and insight, amongst many other awards and accolades that followed. The campaign gained even more traction a few months after our launch back in 2019, when Trump used a variation of the insult to tell these 4 congresswomen in a series of tweets to go back and help fix the totally broken, crime-infested places from which they came, or something along those lines. Now, the congresswomen obviously were all women of color, and they were clearly the targets, but what added insult to injury was that, and amplified the ignorance, was that only one of those 4 women was not born in the U.S. I mean, was born in the U.S. I'm sorry, was not born in the U.S. So it reinforced the ignorance that, you know, when we hear this, and we hear this phrase used so often, a lot of the times it's coming from ignorant people, and it's not even something that we created to waste our time fighting the ignorance, but it's something that we created to just undermine it and reclaim the phrase. And so this incident and many more like it is confirmation to us that the work that we're doing with this campaign is far from over. So we definitely want to thank you guys for supporting and continuing to support. We, along with this campaign, as Kent mentioned earlier, we launched a few others as well. We're currently working on a project because obviously quarantine had us locked down for quite some time. So we weren't able to do as many trips to the continent as we would have liked. So we focused our efforts here in the U.S. in our own backyards. And we encourage our community to go out and empower some of the Black businesses that we have here in the U.S. with what we call our Black Elevation Map. So if you go to www.blackelevationmap.com, there are over 30,000 businesses there, Black businesses, that you can go and support in both your city and other major cities in the U.S. So that's something that we are very passionate about, along with our Go Back to Africa campaign. So, if you guys have some time, check out the site. It's www.blackelevationmap.com. You can, learn about some dope Black businesses here in the U.S. and cities like yours and others. You can also create your own itinerary. So if you're the planner amongst your group of girlfriends or, your group of friends, you can go there, create an itinerary specific to whatever city you wanted to visit, and check that out. So I know this conversation is about Africa, but I had to plug that in there because that's some other work that we're working on as well. But we definitely thank you guys for having us. And, we're here, www.blackandabroad.com. We're here to stay, and we're the trusted resource for travel, both travel here and on the continent. So check us out when you get a chance. Yes.
Thank you both so much. Your work is amazing. We definitely will, continue to visit your websites. I love a good itinerary, so that's all I needed to hear. I am definitely the planner of my friends. So thank you for sharing those gems. And we really do look forward to, digging more into what you've already created. And then obviously, we're excited about your future initiatives as well. So thank you so much for being a part of our capstone event today. And so now let's go ahead and bring Jessica back in so we can start having some great conversations from the audience. Again, we encourage you to put your questions in the chat. We're going to try to get to as many of them as possible. So be patient with us. So with that, Tiffany, do you want to kick us off with a question for our panelists?
I would love to. I think, as I sat here listening to both Jessica and then also Ken and Eric, one message that really resonated inside of me is kind of using your platform to help change the narrative. I think as a marketing company, a beauty company, right, it's always a message that is important for us to be reminded of. Jessica, you used your platform of travel. Eric and Kent, you used the platform of technology to really change the narrative. And so let's start kind of in mainstream media. And the question I have for anyone can hop in and answer it, but how do you feel Africa is portrayed in the news and mainstream media, and how would you like to see this change?
I'll start. It's just, so again, like, and I mentioned it a little bit in my little speaking points. As someone who grew up as an African booty scratcher in the United States of America, it is still like wild to me that like Africans are so in vogue. Shout out to Lupita for changing all of our lives. But like for me, I noticed a marked experience in how people viewed me, both within the Black community in the US and outside, after she came to the forefront. And people was like, she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And I mean, I think it's clear, like Africa is portrayed as like poor, destitute, all of these things, when in fact, like, it's the richest continent in the world, right? Obviously it's been raped and pillaged, but like at the end of the day, it is powering European nations, right? Like if you think about all of the natural resources, it's literally powering European nations. And I don't know if you guys saw, but Ghana's president was just in Switzerland and was like, yeah, all that cocoa and exploitation, it's not going down anymore. So I think like he has done so much to change the possibilities, right? And so I hope other governments look to him as a resource, but also as like the blueprint for leaders who can actually take back their countries, take back their resources, tell the Europeans, you can still get it. It's going to be more expensive. We're going to capture more of the value in the value chain. And then you can figure it all out from there. And so I love that. And I just think in general, the fact that now, social media has democratized media, right? So for me to be able to use my platform to tell stories, to show images, to show videos, and just show like everything is so multidimensional. Like it's not a single thing. Blackness isn't a monolith, and nor is the African continent. So I think, folks like me, folks like Ken and Eric, and so many other peers that we have done such great work to just create more beautiful images of like Black joy, and just showing just Africans in general in a beautiful light. So.
Yeah, I'll add to that. It's not too much to add. She covered a lot, but I'll add to that. The other aspect to it too is Africa has some of the youngest populations in the world. So they are really going to lead the future as far as culture, technology, creativity. And you can see that in a lot of the business moves that have been made in the last couple of years. They know that Africa is the source, the resource, and will continue to be. But it works in their favor to portray it negatively to keep the general population away, because the more people that go and discover, wait a minute, this isn't what I was told, the more the opportunities come for the regular people to really have an opportunity to see its beauty. And when you go there, you'll see European people have been traveling there for years. It is the destination point. And you're like, if they come here and they are seeing the value in it, but at the same time, trying to put it out there as negative, what's really going on? What's really happening here? So I applaud all of the work that we do, Jessica, Eric, and I, and our peers, to really just just really call out the lie for what it is, right? Like it's a lie, and media knows it's a lie, and we've been put here to really shift focus and tell the truth about the continent.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of the things that I noticed is that there's this enlightenment, this collective raising of consciousness amongst the diaspora. So we're having conversations now. Jessica mentioned it earlier. She experienced, from here in the States, being called an African booty scratcher. That comes from ignorance. That comes from not knowing what there is, across the pond. And now that we're starting to figure some things out and make these connections, there's literally this collective raising of consciousness among the diaspora, to where we're talking about investing in the continent. We're talking about buying property, things that white people have been doing for generations. and building generational wealth from the continent. So not just to look at it from an investment standpoint, but we're just gaining these legs, and they're slowly, it's slowly creeping up and simmering, and the future is looking brighter and brighter to answer your question about how Africa is portrayed in the media. But we're going to have control over that narrative as diasporians. So it's a great thing to see because we're seeing it now.
Yeah, I mean, everything you guys said is just, it resonates in some type of way. Being African American, seeing the movement with my own eyes is very different to, how we portrayed Africa back when I was in elementary school. Jessica, I totally remember being on the playground and hearing, my friend who had immigrated over from Africa being called that. And I was just like, well, what does that even mean? Like, how do we even how do we even come up with that? And I remember going home and saying it in front of my mom. And she was like, ma'am, I'm gonna get you together real quick, because I don't know who taught you that, but what you're not gonna do is say it again. So it's just crazy to kind of see that change, and that, I don't know, that love for the continent kind of improve over the years, and now become such like a staple in our lives that, to Eric and Ken's point, we're talking about buying property, like who would have ever said, oh, let me see what a house is like in Ghana. I don't know if that's ever come out of my mouth before. So thank you guys for that really great discussion. I think Eric and Kent, with you guys being so new to ELC and the travel retail family, you briefly touched on the Black Elevation Map. So can you tell us, we know that it happened during lockdown, but what really inspired it? And then how does this connect back to your overall mission of Black and Abroad?
Yeah, I picked that up. Oh, you want to go? Okay, well, real quick, we started literally in the middle of the pandemic. So we were still in 2020 when we were brainstorming for this project. There was a McKinsey study that had came out around that time about how Black businesses in the U.S. Black brick and mortar businesses were nearly wiped out. There was like an astonishing number. It was around 50% of Black brick and mortars that were shuttering at like astronomical rates. So obviously we couldn't do anything at the time. We couldn't travel. So it was like, well, how can we come together to try to stop the bleeding amongst it? Like, what can we do? Obviously we have a large platform. We have a large following. What can we do? And so years and years ago, we had this project that we were trying to launch. It lived in our heads and we never really moved forward on it because we got kind of lost in the shuffle. But we revisited that idea and said, well, man, let's try to do like a map that will bring business to some of these businesses that are shutting down, and try to stop this acceleration of Black businesses from closing. And we couldn't launch in 2020 because some technical things happened. We kind of pushed it out to 2021, continued to work on it, continue to perfect it. As a result, we were able to garner a few pretty heavy hitters in the media space, both here and in Canada. We have some amazing Black filmmakers to shoot the video, the advertising video for us, and visit some of these actual businesses and showcase them and frame them in a way that appeal to our audience. So we literally just launched this map on the 1st of February to be in line with Black History Month. Not that it's just a Black History Month project, but it's something that started here, and we plan to continue rolling it out rolling it out month after month. So it's something that we hold dear to our hearts, and we encourage our community to go out and support the businesses on the map because there are so many of them.
Yeah, and we've always been interested in how to make data sexy, right? Like how to make data points fun. So looking at like the old topography maps that would show elevations of mountains, and we all know the phrase Black excellence and things of that nature. And we were like, well, how do we take Black excellence further, right? It shouldn't just be about acknowledging the people who are at the top, the talented 10. It should be about elevating the community as a whole. So we're we're not focused so much on the excellence. We're focused more on the elevation. Let's, raise all tides. So that was really our thinking around it too, is like, hey, let's show these data points. A lot of the data we were surprised by. We thought that there would be higher Black populations in certain places, or higher representation of Black businesses or Black historical landmarks. So the data, like I said, we were surprised by, but we knew that it was a tool that could really be a space for discovery and not just be a listicle on BuzzFeed. We wanted it to be interactive. We wanted to really show it from a new perspective. And a lot of the work that we were inspired by, as far as the displays and the visualization of the data, is W.E.B. Du Bois. To me, he's like the king of infographics. If you look at his work in the early 1900s, he was ahead of the game as far as like taking new views on how to approach data and sharing that and making it accessible. So, trying to tie in that along with the work that we've done in the past and the work that we want to do in the future, it really brought the Black Elevation Map to fruition.
No, I think that's amazing work that you all are doing in terms of spotlighting, Black businesses, right? We hear about it a lot in other cultures of how, other cultures will frequent businesses of their own, right, and keeping their money within their community. And I think that's something that we've begun to see Black people do more and more of, especially during this pandemic time, as we continue to bring to the forefront all of the amazing things that, Black people have created. We do want to take some questions that have come up in the chat, and I think this next one is it's a great question, Jessica, especially as you talked about exporting African American culture and then African culture really coming to the forefront. But the question is there any place outside of Africa where you were surprised to see a huge African culture cluster or influence?
That's interesting. I don't know about surprising, but I can tell you like my favorite ones. Definitely Cuba. Like they just blackity black. Love that. Cartagena. I saw somebody mention Cartagena. I agree. Cali, which is another city in Colombia, which actually when I was doing trips with Jet Black, we would do Cartagena in Cali. And I liked Cali because it's more Black. And a lot of people don't go there. It's not like shiny and fancy like Cartagena, but you really get a better sense of like Afro-Colombian culture down there. And then Brazil, like Bahia is just everything. I'm actually going in 2 weeks. It's literally everything. So, and it's interesting because like you can really see like specific African culture. So like Bahia, I'm like, oh, y'all are Nigerians. That's crazy. And Haiti, like they're from Benin. So it's for me, what's been really beautiful is that because I've been to every country in the world, I get to see those like actual cultural connections beyond Africa. It's like, I can say like, oh, wow, your ancestors came from this very specific region, So that's been really beautiful. But those are probably like my favorite places where I found like the African diaspora outside of the continent.
I agree. And I think there's one thing that I felt in Cuba and in Colombia as well, is that, I say this really where it comes to any place where there's a heavy presence of the diaspora, is that you always know how to walk into every grandmother's house, no matter what continent she may have come from, what country she may have come from, what tribe she may have come from. I think that's something that's just innate in all of us. Like you feel that static, that electricity amongst your folks. And Cartagena reminds me of that, especially when you go to Palenque, which is maybe about 45 minutes outside of Cartagena proper, it was the first free town in the Americas of Black people. So to feel their pride, their resilience, and how much they're protective of their space, it invigorates you to want to do the same elsewhere. I'll say one place that I was surprised that there were deep-rooted Blackness was probably Oslo, Norway. There was a far more of a Black presence than I anticipated. So much to the fact that like they had African music celebrations where they really dug deep into it. It wasn't like someone doing an interpretive dance. Like they would bring in folks from different countries and have them talk about their experiences and whatnot. So to see that kind of representation there, and one of my favorite like Black club experiences happened in Oslo, and I'm really surprised about that too. But yeah, there and then there are pockets of communities around the world where the Black people have found themselves and have made community. Those are always exciting to see.
Yeah, I would throw it after you said that. I'm like Stockholm.
Mm-hmm.
Stockholm is very Sudanese and Somali. So yeah, Stockholm as well.
That's really great to know, because I do think I have a friend who works a lot in Oslo, and she actually said the same thing. She would say, "Oh, come meet me in Oslo," and I would be like, "Girl, why? Like, why?" And she was like, "No, you should really come. It's super dope here." And of course, you know, when your friends tell you something, you just think they want you to come be with them. But now to hear y'all co-sign, I guess I'll add Oslo back to the list.
Also, Norway, I think like just from like nature, I love Norway. It's one of my favorite countries. I went to the north and like in the fjords and went whale watching. So if anybody's just interested in nature, it's also very beautiful for that.
Very good to know. We actually have another question from the chat, which is a two-parter. So I think the first part, Eric and Kent, and maybe Jessica, you may have some ideas as well, but what we want to know is, can you describe the ways in which the American visitors that you've helped, that you've brought to the continent, like how did you help them with their culture shock? And then what can visitors do to better immerse themselves seamlessly into these different cultures? So Eric and Kent, I don't know if you want to take it first and then we throw it to Jessica.
Yeah, I think traveling with a group of people usually helps with the culture shock. You know, the people travel in groups for safety and among other reasons, because many of our travelers are traveling to Africa for the first time, or any of the places that we travel to. So the main thing that we do is we try to control the you know, just try to keep the group happy by keeping bright, you know, light moments, you know, introducing them slowly to things. One of the worst things about African travel is the history. As a Black person, you will just, you know, like the history of it, when you see about the colonization and all that, that can be a lot for people. I mean, it's a lot of tear-jerking moments. So we try to immerse them into that over the first few days of our trip, and then allow them to gradually enjoy everything else that there is to offer. So that's one of the ways. And we also say, just bring yourself and let us handle the rest. You know, just bring yourself, immerse yourself into it, and we got you. We do this. You know, we have partners on the ground. So just by telling them to bring themselves and nothing else, and a positive attitude, you know, that pretty much solves any of the culture shock that's there. And then there's not much anyway, because I think Jessica mentioned it earlier. Much of the culture we have here in Africa, as African Americans, is rooted from Africa. You know, a lot of the music. I'm from DC. We listen to something called go-go, right? It originated in DC. It's all congos. Literally, the music is a bass line of congos. So that's from the continent. So my first time there, I was like, wait a minute, you know, I can get with this because we do this in DC anyway. So a lot of that, not just for DC, people from DC, but from a lot of other places, we can trace our culture back to the continent. So for Black people like myself and people that come on our trips, it's usually not much adjustments or shifting culturally that they have to do when it comes to culture shock.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, it's just breaking down expectations before they get there. I remember one of our guests, she was from Baltimore, like hood Baltimore, The Wire, all that, and was tripping out about being in Ghana. And it's like, girl, you from the block. Ghana is one of the safest countries in the world. You can still have your wits about you, right? Like don't get into full vacation brain where you think everyone is here to give you the best time of your life. They're not going to steal from you, but they might charge you extra for something that you may have paid less for if you kept your Baltimore spirit about you out there in that regard, right? But you know, you're not going to get shot up. You're not going to have that experience. So kind of just, you know, reshifting that early on, and you can kind of pick it up in people who just look like they're a little skittish and jittery. And it's like, breathe for a second. I remember the first time I touched down in Ghana, within 10 minutes, it was Eric and I's first time. I said, something is different here. Something is very calm, right? Like just the tone of voice, you know, in their approach. I was like, it's a space to breathe. And a friend of ours there was like, the first time he heard gunshots was when he visited another country. It wasn't in Ghana. So just having those kind of conversations with our group and letting them know, you know, our friends on the ground are willing to have those conversations too. And I think they see just how comfortable we are when we're there. Like that gives them a sense of relief in those first couple of days. But usually by day 2 or 3, it's gone. They've shaken that off and they have fully decided to immerse themselves in the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting, and I appreciate hearing it from your side, because as an African taking Americans to Africa, it's always like, you know, being honest, I sometimes would be offended, right? In the way that somehow, like how people react, because I'm like, y'all are acting like white people. You know what I mean? And I think it's just that cultural difference, right? So like taking a picture of a woman who's breastfeeding her child, I'm like, don't do that. You know, and so for me, a lot of how I push my clients was like making sure they were being respectful and not acting like white tourists. You know what I mean? I'm like, please don't do that. The other thing is like, I push people to be uncomfortable. You know what I mean? Because like, I remember I took a group to Kenya, and this was within the first 48 hours. And we had planned to go to this restaurant, Mama OliH, which is amazing in Nairobi if you ever are there. And we're waiting because there were 2 separate cars. We're waiting. I'm like, what is going on? Where are they? These folks went to KFC en route to this restaurant. And then they tried to hide it from me. I was so mad. And I'm like, you are 48 hours in. You can't like just take this experience, you know what I mean? And it was, so for me, I feel like I'm like a harder tour leader, because I'm like, guys, like you got to have this experience, like leave all that other stuff at home. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'm like, you going to France, like most of the time in France, you're going to try whatever, you know what I mean? You're going to try whatever food. You're going to go to Italy and try whatever food. So like, why can't you give these African countries that same, you know, that same sort of wanderlust that you give to Europe? You know what I mean? So I remember I was so mad. I was like, I cannot believe y'all. And then, yeah, like a lot of people, then, you know, like fish comes with heads, and then people are like, you got to take that off before it comes to the table. So I just always try to encourage, like when I was hosting trips, just making them feel like it's okay to be uncomfortable. You'll be fine. You won't die, I promise. You won't, like, you can't say you're not going to get shut up. You're not, no crime is going to happen against you. But it's okay for you to be uncomfortable, because in accepting that discomfort, you are able to learn so much more, you know? And again, like I said before, you have to come from a place of humility, in particular as Americans, in a place of like non-judgment. I think that's really important.
Yeah, no, Jessica, I love what you said. I think we all need to get a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because that's when growth happens. That's when change happens. That's when, you know, we can start to change our own perceptions of different things. But I think we have a couple more questions that we want to get to in this conversation. And one of which is, we kind of talked about mainstream media, right, and changing the narrative, but how can we start to change and shape the perceptions of the people around us to really help and influence you know, the beauty of the diaspora, right? The beauty of the African continent, so that they're not afraid to go there, so that they don't feel on edge while they're there in the country, and they really accept it and embrace it for its natural beauty.
I think by meeting them where they are. Some people, not everybody travels to the continent for the same reason. You have some people who want to learn the history. You have some people that are foodies. They want to try some of the food out there. You have some people that just want to connect. You know, you have some people that go over there to find husbands or wives, and you know, because they want to reconnect with the diaspora for real. So it's like everybody has different reasons. So we do this by meeting people where they are. You know, one of the guests that we had with us, she was a stylist, so she was like, you know, inspired by the African fashions, some of the fabrics that they use. They got, I mean, some of the best textiles. I mean, it's literally the origin of creativity. You know, so it's so many different avenues that we can meet our guests and meet our people at, and that's one of the beautiful things about it, to meeting them where they are.
And I would say even before you get to the continent, I think social media sharing, like if you see a dope video from a cool like country or something, share it with people. You know, if you hear people saying, you know, inappropriate comments, check them. I think it's so much about holding people accountable. And I think with like the work that we do, one thing I do is like with my access, I'm checking folks all the time. I'm talking about media folks, you know, some of these larger magazines, I have had conversations with them and I'm just like, why aren't you ever sharing African destinations on your Instagram? And they're like, oh, well, our audience isn't interested. I'm like, because you're not telling them to be interested. You're literally the gatekeepers for where people want to go. So if your whole entire Instagram is only Europe and North America, how would that person who follows you feel like, oh, Uganda is an option if you never post it? You know, it's not that they're interested. You're not sharing it with them to make them interested. So I think it's so much about we have to share. And then for those of us who have that access, we have to hold them accountable.
Right. Yeah. It's so often that these bigger media outlets are afraid to add, and for lack of a better term, color or texture to these stories, right? They're keen on having it come from one narrative. And think about the story that Jessica can tell as a Ugandan going home, right? That story to me is far more interesting than someone there coming to take photos of things that they don't have a true connection to, right? I'm far more interested in reading and discovering that story. Or the person who just figured out their DNA test results and found out that they're from a certain region, and them going home and having that experience. Those kinds of stories are far more, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? They're far more just rich in the opportunity for content and discovery and conversation, right? And those stories are not getting the spotlight that they should. And like I said, that is the reason why people feel a certain way before they come to the continent, or when they get there, we have to, you know, kind of beat down these expectations because of the way that people have chosen to display these countries for so long and these stories, or just not share these stories at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you guys bring up a really good point about, you know, holding people accountable, because when I joined the travel retail team 3 years ago, I don't think that I had Africa on my list, at least not in the top 10, right? And I'm African American. And it wasn't until I started having conversations with friends, with colleagues, that they just checked me on, well, why don't you have Africa on the list? Like, you know, you're super hype about going to Portugal. The Seychelles is another 9-hour flight. Why can't you just, you know, take some extra days and go see that? Or where's your plan to visit Kenya or go to Ghana? You know, I absolutely love cats. Why are you not going on a safari in Africa? Things like that would come up. And while it was said in a place of, you know, kind of jest and funny, haha, there was actually some truth to it. Why wasn't it on my list? Where, you know, why did I feel so compelled to leave it off? So definitely agree with you around social media and the accountability. And I think, you know, as we could talk about this all day, obviously, but one of the things that Tiffany and I were thinking about is, you know, when we talk to you guys, you give us such wealth of information and, you know, new tools to use to be better travelers. So in 2022, where it looks like we all might be wheels up again, hopefully, What's coming up next for you? What are you most excited about, for 2022? We're approaching the last month of the first quarter. What's next for Kent, Eric, and Jessica?
Well, we definitely have it on our calendar to get back on the road. So, of course, the pandemic has changed things, right? But it's also increased the excitement around people having that once in a lifetime experience, right? Everybody wants to have the trip of the ages. So we're trying to harness in on that energy and get back on the road again. Every time we've had these conversations, like, is it time? Your girl Corona want to pop up with a new variant, so we have to deal with expectations, and also the bigger part of being respectful of the country that you're going to. Right? You may be vaxxed and ready to roll, but with Omicron being a thing, you don't want to be the reason why there's an outbreak somewhere, even though you're protected. If you're being a responsible traveler, you're also thinking about the people you're visiting, right? So we were in our planning for, what does Black and Abroad's trips look like post, well, I can't even say post pandemic, but what does it look like in 2022, right? We're also trying to be just as much of the community that we're going to. So being mindful of that and respectful of that in these times, and just thinking about how people want to travel now. We were very keen on having group experiences, and now that doesn't work necessarily in how you book hotels, because we don't want people sharing rooms with other people that they may not have known. That may have been exciting before, and now it's a fear for folks. So trying to manage all of those things into what our new experiences look like has been fun, to say the least. But no, we're happy to get back on the road too, and just to play around in these new ideas of what it means to travel in our world.
Absolutely, I second that. That pretty much sums it up for me as well. It's just creating these safe experiences on the back to the continent, but still allowing the guests to have fun and thoroughly enjoy the country and learn about these different countries, and the culture as well. My main thing right now is the Black Elevation Map. I mentioned it earlier. I'm gonna keep saying it because in the meantime, while we're waiting to go to the continent, let's support these Black businesses here in the U.S. And keep us open and show the power collectively that we have to contribute to this trillion-dollar industry, this trillion-dollar tourism industry here in the U.S. We can take some of those dollars and take them straight to those Black businesses on the Black Elevation Map. So that's mainly my focus right now.
Love that. For me, my focus is trying to always balance living a super fun life and work. So, travel is so important for me. It's like my oxygen. So like I said, I'm going to Brazil for 2 weeks, in 2 weeks. I'm going to Senegal for the Biennale in May. And then my book comes out. So for me, I'm just focused on that, like planning the book tour. I will be all over the African continent in December, doing book tour stops and showing up in clubs and drinking everybody's champagne. I recommend, if you want to go like specifically West Africa, Lagos. I saw there was somebody Nigerian in here who said Dirty December. Like it's such a vibe. Like if you've never done Accra or Lagos in December, do yourself a favor and just go. Book your tickets now because Delta's not playing on those prices. But you won't regret it. There's going to be so many people there. You don't need to go with a group. I mean, it's obviously nice, but also I feel like not Lagos though. I love Nigeria. If you don't really know Lagos or people there, I wouldn't say just show up because the airport experience alone is one for a seasoned traveler. But Ghana, you can just show up. So I highly recommend doing that in December. But yeah, for me this year, it's all about the book and it's another little secret project that I have coming up.
Wow. No, thank you all for those incredible insights. I think this journey and this conversation has been incredibly enriching. People are very excited. I can tell from the comments in the chat to, be wheels up again, to be traveling. And I think this just, helps inspire us to get back to the motherland, right? Get back to Africa, experience it, see it for our own eyes so that we can make our own, we can shape our own narrative for ourselves, right, by seeing it firsthand. So thank you to Jessica, Kent, and Eric for joining us on this conversation and taking us on this journey. Again, powerful conversation with a powerful group of people. And so we hope to see you around the Noble TR family here soon. And thank you to everyone for viewing this show. We hope you gained some insights that you can use in your travels, both here and abroad.
Absolutely. We also want to say that we are super grateful within travel retail to our executive sponsors, Olivier Beautry and Michael Mercano, as well as our executive advisor, Israel Asa. We're always grateful for their support of Noble TR and their leadership when it comes to inclusion, diversity, and equity. As Tiffany said, we really hope that you enjoyed this session as much as we enjoyed hosting it. Learning about Black culture is a personal journey, but you got some gems here today that you could use in your personal life as well as your professional life potentially. So we hope you have a fabulous day. Happy Black History Month, and we'll see you next time on Noble Entertainment Television. Bye.
Bye, everyone.